Something unexpected happened during a routine political discussion, and within seconds, the entire studio fell completely silent. No one had planned for it. No one had prepared for it. But what unfolded next turned an ordinary broadcast into one of the most tense and revealing moments of the night. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat beneath the warm studio lights, speaking calmly about accountability and the way power often survives when people with influence choose silence over truth. Her voice was steady, her tone measured. She explained that when authority protects the comfortable while ignoring the suffering of others, it stops being stability and becomes something far more dangerous, a system that demands honesty and courage to challenge it. The host leaned forward slightly, preparing to ask his next question. But before he could speak, a firm voice suddenly cut through the room. "Excuse me. Stop right there." Every movement inside the studio froze instantly. The cameras were still rolling. The lights were still bright. But the atmosphere had changed. The voice had come from near the control booth, and the entire crew slowly turned toward the sound. Then, from behind a curtain near the back of the studio, someone stepped forward. Melania Trump. Dressed in a sharp white pantsuit, she walked calmly toward the set with composed confidence. Her expression was controlled, but the room could feel the tension immediately. The host looked visibly surprised. He quickly admitted that she was not scheduled to appear on the program. But Melania calmly replied that she had been listening from backstage and could not allow the comment about silence to go unanswered. For a brief moment, no one spoke. Then Jasmine Crockett slowly turned toward her. There was no anger in her expression, only curiosity. She asked Melania what exactly she believed had been unfair about the conversation. Melania responded carefully, saying the suggestion that people like her benefited from silence ignored the complexity of her position and the personal pressures she had faced during those years. She explained that living inside the world of politics brought constant scrutiny, criticism, and expectations that outsiders rarely understood. But Crockett answered calmly. Her point, she explained, was not about private struggles. It was about responsibility. When someone stands beside enormous political power, especially when that power influences millions of lives, silence stops being neutral. Silence, she said, becomes part of the message. Melania insisted that she had spoken when she believed the moment was right. But Crockett gently pressed the point further. How many moments had already passed, she asked, when strong voices could have made a difference? Moments when families were facing immigration uncertainty. Moments when women were speaking about injustice. Moments when communities felt targeted by political decisions. The room remained unusually quiet. Not because anyone was shouting. But because the conversation had become something rare in political television: calm, direct honesty. Melania admitted that the criticism she faced during those years had been relentless and often deeply personal. The spotlight, she said, could feel overwhelming. But Crockett acknowledged that unfair criticism does not remove the responsibility that comes with extraordinary influence. Sometimes, she explained, silence protects the very systems that cause harm, even when the person staying silent believes they are protecting themselves. For a moment, Melania appeared uncertain. She admitted that she had not come into the studio expecting to defend decisions from years earlier. But Crockett responded with a quiet observation. Interruptions, she said, often reveal the truths that carefully planned interviews avoid. The host shifted slightly in his chair, sensing how serious the exchange had become. This was no longer a typical political segment. It had turned into something far more personal, a discussion about power, influence, and the choices people make when the entire world is watching. Melania attempted to defend her focus on kindness and her initiative supporting children during her time as First Lady. But Crockett responded that kindness also requires speaking loudly when children, families, or vulnerable communities are facing injustice. The room fell silent again. For several seconds, no one interrupted. Then Melania quietly admitted something that few people expected to hear. Perhaps, she said, there were moments when she could have said more. There was no applause. No dramatic reaction. Only the stillness of people absorbing an honest admission rarely heard in political conversations. Crockett nodded respectfully. Acknowledging the past, she explained, is only the beginning. Real accountability is measured by what people choose to do next. The host cautiously asked whether the interview should continue. Crockett calmly returned to her seat and said they could move forward. But before leaving the stage area, Melania paused for a moment. Then she turned back and said something quietly. Perhaps it's not too late to do more. Crockett looked at her and answered just as calmly. It's never too late, if words are followed by action. When the broadcast finally ended, the studio remained unusually quiet. Crew members slowly moved around the set, processing what they had just witnessed. It hadn't been a shouting match. It hadn't been a dramatic argument. Instead, it had been something far rarer in modern political television. A tense but honest exchange about responsibility, power, and the complicated choices people make when silence becomes part of the story. And long after the cameras stopped recording, that silence inside the studio still lingered.